All right, PJ, my friend, we are live.
Hello.
This is us on the internet, and in a few moments, I've got no doubt that people are going to start seeping in, joining us. Hopefully, there'll be a few people who tell us where they're from and what's going on. But you had a good day?
Yeah, really good. It's been beautiful today, hasn't it?
The weather's been amazing. Have you managed to get out in this or have you been inside?
I've managed to walk from between my cabin and the house. So that's been lovely.
It's like 25 meters or something.
So yeah, exactly. But that's been fine.
Is that the office at the moment?
It is, yeah. So that's where I'm sort of hiding at the moment. It's worked out really well, actually. So it's the first year that we've had it in operation. I've only been building it 8 years now. So it's a
that's right.
It's a rush job.
8-year project.
Yeah, I think the Burj Khalifa went up a bit faster than my cabin. But
that's right. They spent the same amount of time painting the Sistine Chapel roof. Yes.
And
very good.
It's you know how you can get some cabins that like kit form. This is like there's bespoke kit form, and then we are like super bespoke, which is a way of saying that there's not a single right angle in the whole building. So the whole thing is
tell me, what did you guys have for dinner this evening?
Well, tonight we actually had some pulled pork. So Anna is on furlough, which is working out really well because she's taken up all the cooking.
She's testing all the recipes from the Jamie Oliver books.
Something like that. I don't know where she's getting them from, but it's like having an au pair. I'm not sure I can go back.
I don't know, Anna, if you are going to watch this, I don't know whether this is going to be encouraging for her or not.
Well, she's done brilliantly, so it is. The trouble is she goes back to work next week, and I just don't know what we're going to do.
I don't know what we're going to do.
Yeah.
So we got a sneaky phone call this evening just before dinner time, and I had to use all of my willpower and strength to say no because the Hollies actually called, and the phone call went a little bit like this. Now you know how much I love KFC. I don't know whether there are going to be other KFC fans here this evening, but the Hollies called, and they were like, "Look, Steve, we know that you really like KFC. We're actually in the drive-through queue. Would you like us to pick you up a bargain bucket?"
Wow, there's an offer.
The problem I had was that I was already on my way to Tesco to do our kind of weekly shop. And, Philippa had already got the week planned. And I was in this weird dilemma of, do I ignore my wife and the shopping list from my back pocket, turn around and say, yes, we'll go with the bargain bucket? Or do I carry on? And do you know what? I did actually... Well, I hope that I earned brownie points as a husband because I carried on. I said no. I said thank you. But it is good having friends who know you a little bit, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. People who are eager to bless you in such moments.
Yeah. Gosh, that was commitment to your wife right there.
That's right. So I'm afraid the kind of peas, sausages, and mash probably weren't quite up to this Colonel's secret recipe. However, there we go. I don't know. Have we got any KFC fans tuning in right now? It's great to have people with us. And Steve Bernard already super excited for this. Love the catch up last week, mate. Really pleased to have you with us. And
Steve, nice to have you with us.
There's this is super fun. We've decided we're going to do a few of these kind of catching up type evenings where we're going to chat with either leaders from within the King's Arms, or we're going to chat to people who are kind of good friends of the church. And really, this is just our way and opportunity of just kind of connecting a little bit more. Yeah. And so if there are particular questions that people want to talk to us about, ask us. I'm not saying we'll have any answers. It might be just that we
the internet may just cut out at the moment. If somebody asks me a really difficult question, the broadband's just going to go.
Broadband's just going to go. You got Noah next door. It's like, now pull the plug, son. Pull the plug. But at the same time, I've got a few things that I'm going to ask you about, mate. It's so good to have you with me. And, it's really good to chat. So hopefully over the course of the next 45 minutes to an hour or so, we'll get to chat. And in the midst of our ramblings and maybe sharing some stories, we just trust that people will be blessed by it, I guess.
Yeah.
So excited to be with you. Feeling good about tonight?
Yeah, great. Yeah, I've never done one of these before. I understand this is live on something called Facebook. So,
so you're one of the few people in the world I know who aren't on Facebook, are you, mate?
I just have enough trouble replying to all the other messages I'm getting. I've just never seemed to have found time. I do intend to. Yeah. And I do have a Facebook account, but it has no details, no photographs, nothing on it. It's rather anonymous.
Right. So those who are going to watch this evening, whether it's on the YouTube Live, our new page, or whether it's here through the kind of Facebook Live page, listen, you need to do one of two things. Either people need to start a petition to get PJ on Facebook, Or maybe that you need to just take this opportunity as maybe a very unique one to be like, right, we've got Paul. What can we do? This is great. So very good. Well, listen, mate, one of the things that I decided when I first started thinking about doing this was that I wanted to ask everybody a little bit about your story, okay? Because we get in the first few minutes of any live chat, you might have people just checking out the first few minutes. And I think for me, recognizing that people might not have anything to do with the King's Arms, maybe haven't even thought about what a relationship with Jesus looks like. Okay. So I wonder whether you could start by sharing a bit of your story and how you came to kind of know God and put your trust in Him. All right.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, obviously, there's like the hour-and-a-half version, and then there's just a couple of minutes version. So I'm going to go with that. So I didn't grow up in a Christian household. Family never went to church, anything like that. My parents actually owned a DIY store, which is a bit ironic given my history with DIY.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you about that later.
Yeah. This is in the days before B&Q and places like that. And they would have window displays, and they would get these window displays done by a lady who was amazing, brilliant at art and creative stuff and that kind of thing. And she was a Christian. They didn't know that. And there was just something about the way she was, the way she did her job within the store, that really intrigued my parents. So she would come in when the store was shut, and be there, and they would end up there till like early hours of the morning, drinking coffee and talking about life and the meaning of life and everything. And it was out of that my parents decided, oh, well, let's go, and there's something to this church thing. They would have said they were religious, but never went to church, never had any relationship with God. And so they took us basically on a tour of loads of different churches around the area, just trying to find somewhere that we fit. And we turned up at this in Camberley. We turned up at this one Church of England church, and I was used to the normal drill of what I'd seen. There'd be, to be honest, sometimes quite a boring service. I'd sit there, I was 13, a bit bored. And then what would seem to happen to me at the end is that everybody would get up, and then as I interpreted it, the minister or the vicar would head for the exit to slow people down from leaving quickly. That's the way I interpreted it anyway. And so he'd be shaking hands with everybody as they left the building. Except that didn't happen in this one place. Everybody sort of stayed and hung around, and it was like these people knew each other and cared about each other and stuff. And I was gripped. I could tell there was something about this community. And it was from there that really my interest in faith and Christianity started, because I watched it in the lives of people interacting with one another. And that was where I became a Christian, St. Mary's in Camberley. And that's what sort of kind of where my journey started, really.
Cool. Very good. But you know, there's something really special, isn't there, about the church working well when it comes to family, when it comes to relationships, when it comes to the kind of one anothering. And I mean, to be honest, I don't know about you in terms of what you're missing from kind of normal life right now, but I tell you, it's those kind of times actually before the service, end of service, which I'm kind of really missing. And so, just the number of people that you can kind of connect with as you're walking through a foyer or, wandering around the back of the room, and we're missing faces. I mean, Justin, who was with us last week, has just said hello. Guys, feel free to say hello as you're kind of coming in. Tell us who you are. Tell us where you're from. But, we miss you guys, and, miss the faces, miss the families, miss the kids charging around and grabbing the biscuits before I can ever get there. But it is one of those.
The little ones are fast. You have to be quick.
That's right. Well, I'm afraid having three little ones, I know how quickly you got to be, and keeping an eye on them before they grab the chocolates and spray crumbs everywhere. It's all good. Hello, Helen. Good to have you with us.
How are you finding it, Steve? Now obviously we were 1 week into the university before lockdown. How are you doing?
I mean, it's definitely challenging times. I mean, I'm a little bit on the extroverted side. And so I like people recharge me. And so, I'm definitely missing that. And to be honest, I found it's kind of comes in waves, actually. There are times when I'm like, right, yes, so God's with us and there's amazing things still happening. And look at the amazing doors that have been opened. And there's other times personally where obviously it's, you feel a bit more withdrawn, you feel a bit more disconnected. And I think it's wrestling with both of those two ends of the spectrum. Now, what I must say in the midst of that, though, is obviously, and again, I'm going to ask you this in a moment as well, but, as people who are kind of pastors and leaders and are eager to support many hundreds of other people, obviously you recognize that those spectrums are vast. So, there are people who are going through genuine hardship right now, who are either struggling with work situations and the possible risk of future. There's numerous people that we know who have lost loved ones or who have been very poorly themselves. And so, mate, you obviously, head up our pastoral team, and you're in one respect responsible for. You do such an amazing job with it, but you look to facilitate the kind of one anothering and support pastoral care across the church. I mean, how have things been from your perspective over this last season?
Yeah, I mean, I think you put it well there. I mean, just the strange thing, it's a bit all surreal, isn't it? The strange thing about this time is you've got a massive spectrum. You've got some people that are, absolutely loving lockdown and the weather, and they've never had such a good tan. And then you've got other people, I've done 2 funerals now for people sadly who've died from the virus, and you've sat or stood with grieving families.
Yes.
And you're only allowed 10 people around a grave at this stage. You just see that whole breadth and spectrum, and so it's really hard. But one of the things that's helped me is like the beginning of the year, before all of this kicked off, Emma was just doing her daily reading and felt prompted by one of her readings, which was on the names of God, and it was El Roy. Which means the God who sees, or the God who sees me.
Yes.
And that has just kind of lived with me since then. And it comes from the story of Hannah. And she's the only woman in the Bible who ever names God, Abraham being the other. And there's something about understanding that God sees each of our individual circumstances, whether it's, the moments of triumph or tragedy, he sees it all. And he's with us in all of that, and I found that a real comfort, actually, knowing that whatever life throws at us, he sees it and he knows.
Yes.
Because obviously, I deal with people in difficult situations and going through tough times, and for most, it's that thought that no one really understands. That's the hardest part for them.
Yes.
Obviously, for us as Christians, the truth is God gets it.
Yeah.
And do you remember when it all kicked off in Bergamo in northern Italy? I remember reading a quite harrowing report from an intensive care doctor there, and he said one of the terrible things about this disease is because it's so contagious. When people die, they die alone. And I instantly felt the Holy Spirit say to me, "Christians don't."
Yes, come on.
That when Jesus says, "I'll never leave you or forsake you," he really meant it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that for me, I just felt like that, there really is tragedy, but we'll never ever be on our own, even in the moment of death. And I found that to be really timely and helpful, actually. So
absolutely.
But meanwhile, others are having a great time, connection with their family, and they shouldn't feel guilty about that. Should savor those moments. So real mix.
Well, dive in there for me a little bit, because obviously for for each individual finding their place and making their connection, but in the Johnson household, what would be some of your highs, and what have been some of the things you kind of miss or that you kind of finding particularly challenging?
Okay, so some of the highs are we've got into family volleyball in the garden.
Nice, very good.
Yeah, and so it goes for as long as the ball stays in our garden. If it goes into the neighbours' garden, that's the end of that.
Have you got friendly neighbours who are willing to throw it back?
We have, although I think we've stretched that a little bit, and so now it's moved into family badminton, which is a lot less testing on the relationship with the neighbours. So that's been fun. So we've been doing that. Obviously, been eating meals together, that kind of thing. Some of the tougher sides of that, I'm finding the home education really hard.
Right.
GCSE maths. I mean,
well, we're finding it, by the way, with 7-year-old maths, year 2 maths.
And also it's very hard for the teenagers, because this is unprecedented for them as well as us. And it's they're drawn towards being on online gaming, because that's where their friends are, and so it's not just that they're sat in front of a screen, but that's where they're connecting. So it's really hard, and so that's been, in terms of us as a family, one of the toughest parts. But like, you're missing connecting with people, and just I don't so much miss the meetings, but it's the connecting with people. It's those little incidental moments, catching up, the messing about, the laughter.
Yeah.
I miss that.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kind of seeing each other when you're grabbing a tea in the kind of staff areas. Those.
Yeah.
Kind of things.
Yeah. That's right.
No, I
Absolutely.
totally understand. Listen, I'm going to say hello to a few people. So Evelyn, it's great to have you with us. Here's Rob Wainwright. He's such a good man. Miss that guy.
Yeah.
And then we've got Nick Little, who thought maybe you're PJ Smythe. Now,
Right. Yeah, you might be disappointed.
Is two incredibly attractive men of God.
We're both good-looking guys. You could easily mistake it.
I totally understand it, but no, this is Paul Johnson of Bedford fame. Is that fair? Where did the nickname come from?
I was working in one of the rehab houses that we had at the time as a project, and there were too many Pauls around.
Right.
And I was only in Bedford on a gap year, so I was here for 10 months, and I thought, well, just to save confusion, just call me PJ by my initials. That's fine. It's just 10 months. Well, it doesn't bother me. So here I am, 30 years later.
30 years later. Wow,
yeah.
Impressive.
Yeah.
Well, listen, so anyway, Paul Johnson is with us. Maybe we should use that in the whole tile, but most people, certainly throughout King's Arms, would know you as PJ, wouldn't they?
Yeah, yeah.
And, so good evening to Claire. Good evening, Sharon, Daniel Household. Great to have you with us. And this is fun. It's great, guys. And just to say, if you do kind of come up, if you're one of the people who's watching us live right now, do feel free to say hello. If there are particular questions that kind of come up in your mind that you want us to cover and touch on, or completely ignore, depending on how complicated they are, or even if you just want to say hello and tell us where you're from, you're really most welcome to do that. But so, mate, you say you're doing okay. You've got the badminton going on. You're coping.
Yeah.
You're not too zoomed out at the moment. Not too many video calls.
I do hit a threshold. I don't know about you, but I sort of phase out. What I want to do is record a short video of me smiling and nodding, and then put it on a loop. I just think that would help me through a lot of meetings. I could just get through on that basis. So yeah,
absolutely.
Perhaps not the interview tonight. I can't really do that, but
no, you can do that. Yeah. Well, listen, there's a few things obviously tonight that I was hoping to kind of, I don't know about drill you on. Maybe that's a little bit harsh. But certainly ask you about. Okay. Now, mate, I've got to say, you're one of those people that I come to wisdom for so frequently, and so appreciate the way that you ask questions, so that appreciate the way you draw me out. And, I think that in reality, when people get to watch this back and who are watching live right now, obviously there is this sense of staying emotionally healthy through everything that's going on. And, someone, and I'm going to ask you about your counseling and your training later on and how all that's going. But for now, I wonder whether you could just share a little bit. In fact, interestingly, Nick has just said it right now, asking about mental health and, wanting to find out a little bit about, how do you go about looking after yourself? And, maybe just touch on the things, whether it's spiritually or even, from a health and fitness perspective, and how all those things tie together.
Yeah. I mean, I think partly you've said it there already, and I think they all tie together. So I don't think you can isolate one thing from the other. I think one of them is developing an emotional awareness is one thing, and developing an emotional vocabulary. So recognizing what's going on inside you emotionally, catching it, and then processing it in a healthy way. I tend to use the little mnemonic, when in doubt, use your head, HED. And H stands for be honest about what you're facing. E stands for express it. And then D is for decide what's the godly way of moving forward. So honest, express, decide. I find that helpful as a way of just sort of processing what I'm going through emotionally. And then making sure that there are emotionally replenishing activities as well. I think so many of us don't know what recharges us emotionally. We know what depletes us, but we don't know what recharges us. So I think understanding that. So, I'll try and do things. Worship times I find help replenish me, particularly when I'm alone worshiping, and physical stuff. So most days in lockdown, I'll finish the day with, I've got to be honest, a fairly pathetic workout, but some sort of workout. I'm convinced that I'm burning a lot of calories when I work out, but it's mainly through moaning. So I think I'm going to release a video one day, a workout video, where it's just, you have the pre-workout groaning and moaning, and then you moan through it. And then I think that's how I actually burn off a lot of calories. So, but to do something physical actually helps me.
Yeah. Okay. So give us some other examples of how you personally kind of replenish that tank then, or maybe even examples that you've seen from other people about staying healthy and keeping the right place?
Yeah, I think knowing which relationships you have with people replenish you and which ones deplete you. So if they're good people that replenish you, the time will go like that. You'll sit down at 7 o'clock in the evening for a meal with them, and before you know it's 11 o'clock. If they deplete you, it's the other kind of way. So making sure you get time with people who really do replenish you. I think for me as well, I find journaling really helpful.
Right.
I find I can touch type, which really helps, so I can get out my thoughts and my feelings on the computer, and that helps with a very password protected journal. That is a must.
Probably needs to be. Yes, this is me kind of unloading everything.
You really don't want that hacked, but I find that just a way of getting out what's going on for me emotionally. So I think that's really helpful. I also think laughter is, laughter's good medicine. So finding things that you find engaging and entertaining, as opposed to things that where you just veg out. Do you know what I mean? There are sometimes when I'll sit down and I don't know, I'm flicking through YouTube or something, and an hour and a half goes, and I feel more tired afterwards than I did at the start. Do you know what I mean? So figuring out, is this actually really replenishing me?
Yes.
Or is it just vegging out? I think that's an important distinction.
Yeah, because it's not necessarily, is it, that watching television, YouTube, whatever is wrong, is it? But it's just working out, is this actually filling my tank?
It's what is it doing for you? Yeah.
I think for a long time, I would use that almost as a course path of least resistance. And, it would be easy to kind of slouch and disconnect and stop the mind working. But it's whether at the end of the evening then you're able to sit up and think, oh, yes, actually, now I feel fresher, I feel lighter, I feel... And often I don't find that you do. And again, that's not necessarily that it's wrong, but I think sometimes that's not necessarily going to refresh people, is it?
No. And I think some of that comes down to the difference between avoidance and healthy distraction.
Yes.
So I think so often we try and avoid an issue by, anything from, bottle of wine through to really loud music or over exercising or whatever it is. And that's not good for us. Whereas healthy distraction can be. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, very good.
Knowing the difference between the two, I think is important. So
well, I've got a follow-up question on that as well. But I'm just going to throw up a question from the screen because I have the power look. And Justin is asking us, what's the best book you've read on emotional health? All right.
Peter Scazzaro, I never know how to pronounce his name. Peter Scazzaro has done The Emotionally Healthy Church and The Emotionally Healthy Leader. I think they're some of the best books. Also, there's a Christian psychologist called Dr. Henry Cloud, and a lot of the stuff he's written and done, I'm sure you'll be aware of him. A lot of his material is really helpful, and the Bible's quite good as well. So
the Bible,
yeah.
Well, I'm going to throw up another question for a moment, although we're going to touch on part of this later. But Helen Moore is asking us, and agreeing mental health is such a big issue, and how do you guys cope with negative, combative news and social media? Now, the reason I say we're going to draw on it later is that I'd love for us to touch on later on, Christians contributing to the general conversation when it comes to some of these big issues which are going on right now, and whether that's Brexit or whether that's this last day or two this last few days when we've had information about Dominic Cummings, or whether that's general debate around some of the issues around coronavirus and so on. But that particular thing was, how do you cope with it? So negative, combative news. I mean, have you got any suggestions for people there, Paul?
I think they're probably quite simple ones. I think being aware of what we look at, what we read, feeds us.
Yes.
So what's your diet? What are you feeding on? And all of us has a threshold for negative, cynical news. We've got a threshold, and we get into trouble when we exceed that threshold. So I think obviously we want to be informed, but I don't want to feed my soul on stuff that's going to have a corrosive effect at the end of the day. So the simple answer is, I want to get, so like the Dominic Cummings thing, for instance, all of that blowing up at the moment, I'm aware of it, but I'm not feeding on it. Do you see what I mean? I want to be informed and conscious, but it's not something I'm going to drill into detail on. So I think that is a good a good way. What's the diet for your soul at the moment, and what are you feeding on? So yeah,
really good,
a really big thing.
Really good. Now, one of the things I was going to ask you about that though is you mentioned people being aware of their emotions and aware of their emotional health. In your experience, would you say that most people are aware? And if they're not, or if they would like to grow in their awareness, how do we go about doing that?
Okay. I'm going to be really controversial here. I actually think there's a bit of a gender divide.
Oh, interesting.
I think it's a massive generalization, but I think taken as a whole, I think us guys are probably not as good normally as being aware of our emotions. Whether or not that's going to end up in some sort of big controversial feedback and live comments on that, I don't know. But
I think it's reasonable to say from your experience that there is
and
we recognize it's a generalization, but I think that's okay in this scenario.
So much of the counseling work I'm doing now is helping my clients, who at the moment are all male, helping them identify their emotions and process their emotions. That's such a big part of the work that I'm doing with people, because I don't know whether it's society or upbringing or whatever, it's not created space for men to healthily deal with their emotions. So yeah.
And how do we grow in that?
Or have I avoided it?
No, I mean, I can't tell whether you were avoiding it intentionally. No, it's how do we
natural.
Is how do we grow in that? So if I use myself as an illustration, and I think, hey, I know that I feel troubled, I know that I feel tired, I know that I feel disconnected, but I can't express that. What does it look like for me to, as it were, deep dive or find out a little bit more about how I'm doing?
We're going to do online therapy now, yeah? Should we go for it?
Yeah, that's what it's all about. Yeah, I've got 20 odd people right now who are joining me for
yeah. This could be very entertaining. I think one thing is expanding the emotional vocabulary. So there's like the emotions wheel that you can get hold of online, which gives you core emotions but enables you then to expand upon that. So there are many different types of sadness, for instance. So you go, oh well, it's this kind of sadness, and the more you can identify it, then the more you're able to express it. Do you see what I mean? A little bit like take an extreme example: a toddler, will quickly identify anger, and they'll have a real rage about it, but they've not yet mastered the skills to express it. And in just the same way as us as adults, the more we can have a vocabulary and identify it, then the more we can express it.
Yes. Very good.
So I think so much of that, and then it's bringing that to God. I think so often as Christians we feel like we have to protect God from our negative emotions or what we experience as negative emotions, when actually God wants the whole 9 yards. Search me and know me. So I think so. That's why I don't want anybody to find my journal, because a lot of it is me pouring out all of the angst and the concern and the anxiety and the anger and all of that to God, because His shoulders are broad enough.
Yes.
And so that's such a big part of it.
Yeah, interesting. Steve Bernard just now is asking about whether you've seen a divide in those who are of a different generation, older and younger. Just commenting that those in his experience who are slightly younger, maybe late teens or older boys, would potentially be more emotionally aware. Have you found that as well? Has that been the case?
Yeah. Again, we're talking massive generalizations. So, but I think as a generalization, I'd agree with that. I think that this up and coming generation is, as a whole, more emotionally literate. However, what we want to do is make sure that we're once again treading the radical middle, so that we are neither in denial of our emotions, like some of my generation have been, but nor are we dominated by our emotions.
Yes.
And so those are the two, denial and dominance are the two ends of the spectrum.
Yes.
Which is why in the HED example, honest, express, decide.
Yes.
If you're honest about it, you're not denying your emotions. But if you get to D, you're actually deciding to do something godly as a result.
Yeah, very good.
You're not just stuck in, I feel all these things.
Yes.
But actually I can make godly decisions from this place of pain or upset or whatever it might be.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
Really good, really good. I think for me, it's interesting. From the background of probably being slightly more stiff upper lip and, in terms of kind of childhood, wanting to keep it all together.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I ever came to the King's Arms, And I remember, I'd literally just given my life to Christ on the Wednesday of that week, I think it was, and then coming on a Sunday and kind of reading the words and, sobbing, like literally kind of tears streaming down my face. And it's a strange thing. As a 24-year-old, not what you would normally expect to be doing. But what's interesting is that it's almost like being willing to have an emotional journey even since then. And actually that it kind of being around godly men and women who actually give you permission to be an emotional person is so releasing. And, for me, just like you, finding a space to be intentional about expressing emotions, expressing pain, expressing frustration. And so, where you journal, and I've certainly journaled in the past, but for me, sometimes just going for a long walk, getting out into nature, walking in the woods, being real, expressing both the pain as well as the joy and the challenge and the frustration, is such a good place to be. But what I like about your illustration is always that decide though. So, okay, you've got that all out. Now, what are you going to do with it?
Right.
Which is a critical step, isn't it?
Yes. And so often we see that in the Psalms, don't we? So, Psalms, David's pouring out and some of it is pretty heavyweight stuff, smite my enemies type stuff. But so often you see David ends in a place of praise, or I give it to you, God, or you judge them, God,
Very good. Yeah. Very good. Yeah, no, it's really good. Well, there's another couple of comments that have come in. I particularly like this one from some lady called Emma Johnson. Ever come across Emma? You love this guy. Now, the only thing I must say,
she's watching. Okay.
Well, the only thing I must say is that if Emma's taking up broadband space in the Johnson household,
we had a mobile. Yeah.
Well, so the deal is though, if you cut out, all I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to people about what I've been learning about cooking a really good steak. All right. So if you do disappear, it probably won't be as helpful for the vast majority of people. Certainly, the vegetarians won't like it at all.
No,
but Emma, it's great to have you all the same.
We've got this deal in the household where everybody had to be off for an hour and 15 minutes.
This is negotiated
for many days.
Oh, well done. Well, this is another question, mate. I hope you don't mind me putting up there. It's Lauren Wilthew is asking, how are you getting on with your 20-kilogram kettlebell? Although then it says Phil. So I'm slightly surprised. I don't know whether that's Lauren or whether it's Phil. Who knows? I'm going to take it off, though.
Yeah.
20 kilograms, pretty big, by the way.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody's had tried one of these things. Basically, I was recommended to buy a 20-kilogram kettlebell by somebody who overestimates my athletic ability. And really, it's a dangerous piece of equipment. The only real exercise I can do with it is to put it in a wheelbarrow and then wheel it around the garden. Pretty much, otherwise it's I'm going to break some toes. So no, I do use it, but I just shuffle around with it.
Well done. Well, listen, just because you mentioned toes, and opportune moment for me too. Mate, I know that you've had a tough couple of weeks in terms of a couple of little DIY accidents.
I don't know what it is. Yeah.
The thing is, in the King's Arms, mate, you are absolutely famous for the kind of DIY catastrophes which happen from time to time.
Yeah.
And, I'm going to ask you two things. One, what have you been doing? I think it's a kind of confession moment. What's been going on? And then maybe you could even give me a here's the kind of worst DIY disaster yet type story. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, the trouble is there are so many. I think the main issue is that my ambitions exceed my abilities by some margin. That is the biggest problem. So I always think, oh yeah, I could do that. I'll give that a try. So recently, I was building a new shed at the end of the garden, or renovating a shed, and trod on a piece of wood with 2 nails in it, so they went straight through it into my foot. So then I had to go to the doctors for tetanus, get that all sorted out. And then last Tuesday, I electrocuted myself fixing the dishwasher. It turns out you should turn the dishwasher off before you take it to bits and play around with it underneath. So,
I probably shouldn't laugh, but however, I'm assuming that you obviously, as a responsible person, then started seeking the appropriate medical advice, Paul.
Kind of, yeah. Well, I phoned my dad, which is what one should always do in these moments. Well, he's an electrician, and maybe it runs in the family because he's electrocuted himself many times.
As an electrician, that's very
advice. He's in Australia, so I had to figure out the time zones and everything.
Yeah, I do love your parents. So much time and respect for them. But,
So, but he basically said, if you're still alive now, you'll be okay. So I'm fine. Other than I just cut my hand underneath the dishwasher. So yeah.
Bless you.
My worst one was probably when honesty here, I was chasing a cat out of our garden, and I had a brick in my hand to throw near the cat, but not at the cat, just to frighten the cat away. But I slipped and dropped the brick on my big toe, and it ruptured the blood vessels underneath the toenail, and that resulted in me seeking medical advice on YouTube as to how best to deal with it, because the pressure built up underneath the big toe. And so I looked on YouTube, and the advice there was that you should get a red hot needle. Sorry if people are queasy.
That's right. You'll suddenly see the numbers. 30 odd people watching right now.
Yeah, they drop.
Yeah, no one can cope. Yeah.
No one can cope. And so you push it through the toenail. I tried this, but I'm too much of a wuss. So I thought, what happens? The problem is pushing. But what about if instead of pushing down, what about if I took the pressure off by drilling down? And so I went back to YouTube, and then sure enough, there was a guy from the States, something like rednecks.com or something like that he was on, and he showed you how to drill into your own toenail very carefully so that blood comes out. And the blood comes out. So that's what I did. My biggest issue then was which drill bit to use. Because, I didn't want to go with a masonry drill bit.
Yeah, wood drill.
Yeah, well, that was another problem. So in the end, I went with wood drill, which I maintain is the right drill bit for drilling into it. So I was about to drill in, and then I remembered take it off hammer drill setting. That would have been bad. Yeah. So, but I lived to tell the tale.
Yeah. Well, we obviously we are glad that you do. And the fascinating thing is that we've got a few people who are King's Arms people who are very obviously watching right now. You've got Claire Coggan, who's like, I know what's coming. Natalie Marfley, I can't bear this story. KJ, I love this story.
Yeah.
Then you got,
what does that tell you? What's that? Yeah.
There's even an encouragement here from Sharon that she says you need to start writing a book, mate. Writing a book about all the DIY disasters that you've had.
The worst part was after I drilled in and performed this operation on myself. For a week later, for some mysterious reason, it got infected, and so then I had to go
mysterious reason. That's right.
I know, it's a mystery. I went to the nurse, and I had to tell the nurse what I'd done, and then she used words that aren't in the Bible. So there you go.
Yeah, all right. And Vanessa can remember the story as well. Justin thinks you need your own YouTube channel. Maybe this is the start of your career. Gary Bolton's offering you a job right now. You should come and work for me. He obviously sees the determination. Paul, to keep going no matter what.
I'm there. Health and safety third, like we always say.
Well, listen, let's spin back. We'll circle around to a conversation which might help some more people. But I wanted to ask you about your kind of counselling course a little bit. So,
okay.
I guess partly what made you do it, and so obviously investment in yourself is a brilliant thing in any stage of life.
Yeah.
And so just wanted to unpack a little bit what's been going on, and as it were, how is it going? Like, what are you learning? Are there particular things that's helpful for you and others?
Yeah. Oh gosh, so much. I think what made me do it. Bottom line, we're in the people business. We're in the loving people business. And if there's any way we can get better at loving people, we want to do that.
Yes, very good.
And all we can. And so that was what was behind it. And obviously I'm a pastor in the King's Arms, but I think all of us should see ourselves as pastors of the town.
Yes,
and so for me, longer term, this is a way of pastoring the town and the towns around us. Not just me, but others as well. And I think obviously scripture is our plumb line, but God gives wisdom and grace way beyond the Bible. It's got to fit in with the Bible, but gives wisdom and grace beyond the Bible. So I want us to learn wherever we can and be relevant to the world around us. And I think particularly with all that's going on with COVID and just the amount of tragedy and trauma, particularly that people are going through, I think it's probably more relevant now than it was even when I started the course. And in terms of what I'm learning, I mean, it's very hard to summarize. I have to receive counselling for myself, and that's probably been, well, no, without doubt, actually been the biggest area of learning for me on the course.
Yes.
So I have to receive 40 hours of counselling.
Okay.
I'm up to 37 now.
Okay.
I remember going in week 1 thinking, I'm sorted. What is there to talk about? And now we're going to extend the counselling beyond the mandatory 40.
Yes.
Because it turns out there were issues. But that has been such a journey of learning, and I think it's humbling actually, and I think that's a good thing, because then it means that you go into to counselling situations, recognise that there's stuff in my life to deal with that hasn't yet been redeemed, and so I think that's a good place to be.
Absolutely.
And I think so much of what I'm learning is around insecurity and how that plays out in all of our different lives, and how we try to protect ourselves and cover ourselves. Loads on that. So I'm doing a research project on attachment theory and how that plays out in the workplace. So I'm going to come and psychoanalyze everybody at King's Arms offices. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, well, Vanessa's already said this, but one of the things that I've been always so struck by, and you model this as much as anybody else, my friend, is just the authenticity with which leaders are willing to share, whether it's about their own struggles, their own challenges, and just being real, down to earth. Because I think when we're, as it were, willing to take a mask off, then other people can do the same. And I don't know whether you could comment on this, but see, for a long time, in my ignorance, I'm sure, but certainly it felt like there was a perception around counselling around maybe it's only for the weak. Does that make sense? And it was certainly maybe amongst guys, it was kind of one of those things that we shouldn't engage with, or I think, praise God, that seems to be changing. It's changing generally in society. But do you feel like we're all the way there? Do you feel like men and women embrace now something that can develop themselves like counselling?
I'm sure there's a spectrum in terms of response. I think though more and more people are recognizing that to give time and space to look at your emotional life, your upbringing, how it affects you now, that sort of stuff, it can be really healthy and really, really positive. It's not an easy journey. I said to my counsellor last week, I said, coming to see you, it's like going to the dentist every week, because I don't look forward to it. It's not easy.
Right.
But I want to grow. And I don't, some people say, oh, it's navel gazing and introspection. I don't know that that's true. I think the more self-aware we are, then the better we'll be at listening to others and caring for others. And I'm more than ever convinced that actually probably the most generous thing you can do for somebody is to properly listen. And I think we've got loads of words coming at us in our society. There are very few people who will really actually listen and stand in your shoes and look at the world from your perspective for a moment. And I think it's incredibly powerful. Incredibly powerful. So I think the more that we can do that, we don't have to be counsellors to do that, but just actually properly listen, not think about what you're going to say or asking the next clever question, but actually loving people enough to listen to them, I think is really powerful.
Very good, very good. And what I'm doing right now is I'm really listening and not.
You're doing so well, Steve.
Not thinking about the next clever question.
You don't need to do the course. You're doing great.
Well, I mean, I'm actually gonna again ask you a little bit about that. You don't know some of these things that I'm kind of throwing at you, but
no, I don't. One
of the things that I've always been so grateful for about you is that actually you have the ability to ask questions. Now, this, I think, again, in our society, in our culture, is sometimes something that's missing now. Actually, are people willing to engage and ask open questions and really get to know people? And and I don't just mean, I'm not just talking with people out on the street or that you bump into with a neighbor, but have you got any tips for people about asking good questions, like how we can grow in, how we can learn? What are the sorts of questions that you think can get under the hood of where people are really at?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Steve.
Thank you very
much. I think the first thing is don't develop asking questions to establish a technique, because then it is just that. It's just a skill.
Okay. Yeah, very good.
I think asking good questions comes out from a desire to really know and to really understand.
Yes.
And so I think that's the main thing. It's the heart behind it, because there are all kinds of questions in this world. A prosecuting barrister can ask you really nasty questions. They're great questions, but that's not necessarily loving or building up. So I think it's what's in the heart is the first thing. think so much of it as well is about being unhurried. So being able to sit with someone and to not rush away, I think, is a really powerful thing. I think obviously open questions sometimes are better than closed questions, although closed questions can be helpful for clarification and all the rest of it.
Yes.
So rather than getting into all the skills of it, I think probably more powerful is the heart behind it. And to actually sit and be with someone with whatever they're going through, whether that is a triumph or a tragedy, I think is, as I say, incredibly powerful. And when somebody really is giving you, they really do love you and want to give you that time. They're loving the person in front of you.
Yeah,
can't put a price on that. So I think
taking
time.
Just as a moment of confession for a moment, and I haven't asked her permission, so I'm hoping that she's okay with me sharing this for a moment.
Are we going to get sued? Are we going to be all right?
I think we're going to get sued. I might get clipped over the ear. Basically, Philippa and I, based on the encouragement, actually, some people in our church have just started doing the marriage course. Okay. So again, just trying to be very intentional about investing in our marriage. We're going to watch the DVDs. We're going to have conversation with something really intentional time, which is a really good thing. Now, one of the things that kind of came out in conversation last night, which is almost, I guess I'm speaking to people here who are in relationships, because one of the things that she said, which was really provoking to me and I really wanted to apologize for and repent of, is that she felt like I was incredibly good at asking good questions of people who are friends, who we might go for a walk with, who I'm working alongside, and I'm drawing people out, I'm asking things that are richness. And yet then she said, though, that she never really feels like she's on the receiving end of some of those deep questions.
Okay.
Now, the reality, obviously, is that sometimes we can just go through that kind of day-to-day rhythm and routine, and it's kids and it's doing things, and you're aware of stuff. Yeah. But how frequently do we take the time to pause, to stop, to really go deep with your spouse or with a good friend? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No.
So I guess I just thought it's exactly in line with what you're saying.
Yeah.
But sometimes I don't want people to miss the fact that they can do it to those closest to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rather than just going deep.
Really honest. Yeah, and we've all, I think that's really honest, Stephen. We've all done that. I think the risk is that we give the dregs to the people we love the most. Do you know what I mean? We give the tail end of our day, or the tired bits of us, to the people that are closest to us and we love the most. And I've done and continue to do the same thing. So I think and great that you guys are able to have a conversation about that.
Well, maybe that can help someone in the midst of what they're kind of going through. I'm gonna throw up PK's question, which you might want to just ignore, mate. But there you go. Okay. PK's asking, what's the toughest question that you've been asked? Now, there is a follow-up from KJ who's saying, can you answer it now? But I think that we should probably ignore that one. But is that something that immediately anything springs to mind?
Oh, gosh. Well, there are the factual ones, like, who were the Nephilim, or, the people's names in the Old Testament or something. But I think probably the hardest ones are actually the ones about ourselves, So asking questions like, what are you really afraid of? Or who do you want to be? Or what do you really want? Those kind of questions are actually, I think, sometimes the hardest to answer. So we can do the strategy questions, we can do the factual stuff, and we've got Google. It's the knowing what's in the heart of man that's really important. Or what areas have you still got to turn over to God? What are the unredeemed areas of your life that you're holding on to for your own security? Those are the tough questions. So for me, for instance, to give you an answer for that, it's been around the battle with finance, trusting God for provision and finance, because again, my upbringing and stuff, that has been a real crunch point, and not relying on my savings, and it's letting go of my grip on finance has been a real battle for me. But those deep questions about ourselves, I think, are often the hardest to answer.
Very good. Well, the PK threw up another kind of follow-up that I'm going to throw up here as well, because in the midst of you talking about kind of growing and developing and changing and maturing kind of in your faith, he's particularly asking what your approach to your faith, how it's changed as you've kind of moved toward middle age. Should we say that? Is that the most polite way of putting it?
I think I'm solidly in middle age now.
Well, so as someone who's 40 this summer, I kind of feel like I do need to
mate.
consider myself a proper grown up soon. You know, this is what's next.
Yeah.
So, any thoughts? Do you feel like your approach to your faith has changed as you've grown?
I think the world around us obviously is the culture of youth. So it's like, you know, hang on to your youth, try and look youthful, you know, look as young as you can, all the rest of that. I think whereas obviously the biblical approach is actually that with age comes all sorts of benefits and blessings.
Yes,
obviously there's, you know, measures of physical deterioration as my kettlebell efforts demonstrate. But I think for me, becoming into middle age, I'm definitely now increasingly becoming a father figure to a younger generation just by virtue of my age.
Yes.
And that is a wonderful opportunity because I get to invest in the next generation and the people around me, and less am I being discounted because of my youth. And that used to happen. You know, I became one of the leaders in the church when I was 29, and there were a lot of situations where it's kind of a bit dismissive, like, oh, you're in your 20s, what do you know? Whereas when you're into your 50s, like I am, that question doesn't, you know, that issue doesn't get raised so often.
Interesting.
So I think that, you know, that creates opportunities in a way that it didn't used to. If that makes sense.
Oh, really good, really good.
Have you got any insights as you hit 40? You got, you know, what are you?
Oh, that's what. Interestingly, I think this is a opportunity for me, I think, to do some reflection. And it's interesting. I know this is going to seem crazy, but you know, in lots of respects, because the fact that I came to faith as an adult, you know, as opposed to growing up in the church and having a faith from a church, you know, I've always kind of, in the back of my head, always thought about being a kind of a new Christian in a different respect. But you know, I mean, it's been 15 years, kind of this year coming up, and you know, there's been different stages and steps of engaging with the fact that I am a spiritual father. Now, you know, that is a privilege and it's a responsibility, and it's something that I've kind of continue to kind of own to different degrees. And obviously having your own kids and realizing that it's not just about you doing stuff, but about you giving stuff away and you pushing on others to take responsibility and to, you know, swim themselves. I think I'm getting, and again, I don't want to overplay it, but I'm getting more and more joy out of seeing other people flourish, you know. And I think that feels like a really healthy, maturing attitude. And that's not to say that we've got it all sussed, but you know, I guess I'm looking forward to the days around this summer where I do get to engage with, wow, look at what God's done, and you know, so much that I'm still holding on to for the future. You know, I mean, even this last couple of weeks, I had a friend of mine, prophetic guy in the church, who just phoned me up out of the blue and was like, Steve, I've been praying for you, and you know, I feel like I gave this prophetic word years ago, and you know, I just want to remind you of it. I feel like this season is going to be something. And you know, I don't think when you get those prophetic words which are just beyond and out of reach, and you think, God, I want to be there. I just don't know what that looks like. And so, you know, for me, again, engaging with, you know, yes, you've done all this, but I'm still holding on to you for promises that you've spoken over me, and that now, what does it look like for me to step into that? I think all of those things feel very active at this time, almost at seasonal changes. You know, you kind of like, right, okay, let's go for this in the next season to come.
Right. Yeah. And obviously each season has its benefits, you know, that's the thing.
Yes.
No. Yeah.
So how many years have you been part of the King's Arms, Paul?
I don't know exactly. I think, when did I think since about 93, 92, 93.
Okay.
So,
and how many buildings have you seen us through? So
well, we looked, I think the last count was before we actually bought King's House, we looked at 18.
Oh, no, I mean, necessarily, how many different meeting places have we had?
Oh, so not that many. So I think in my time, we would probably have had 1, 2, 3, about 4. Okay. This might be our 5th.
So this obviously feels like a very different season, doesn't it? Where, you know, from certainly, so my first experience of the King's Arms was at Dame Alice. Yeah. Obviously, we've been in King's House for the last 9-10 years, and now, of course, we're scattered all over the town and the region, and so there's transitions all over the place. You know, if you were to kind of look back over those memories of different places, any particular highlights kind of stand out? Any memories from Dame Alice that you think particularly you're fond of?
I think it was a period of experimentation and adventure for us. There were lots of downsides to it. So there's some things I definitely don't miss, and there were great advantages to having your own building. But I love the fact that we started with an evening meeting.
Yes.
We had, as you remember, we had the lights, so stage lights, and then dark in the rest of the room. Which was, I remember we had one visiting speaker come in. It was back in the days when you wrote out your notes, and he'd written out his notes on a sheet of paper, two-sided. But because of the lights, he couldn't read any of the words. Everything was overlaid over everything else. We had the donuts. We had the break halfway through, mainly so that people could go and get a cigarette.
Right.
Just it was edgy and it was raw, and there was a lot of fun to that. So that's good. And doing baptisms in the swimming pool. Do you remember that?
Yes, I was baptized in that pool.
Were you? Okay, so
baptizing
people in that swimming pool was really that was a great kind of experience, and really good moments. So yeah, lots of good times.
Very good.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just reflecting yesterday. I was listening to Jay John do this little kind of mini talk, and I was thinking back to one of the first Sundays that we ever had at King's House was when Jay John came to speak, and one of my kind of most precious memories of King's House was as he did this kind of altar call at the end of his morning meeting, and seeing just dozens of people flood down to the front and just kind of kneel down before God to give their lives to him. And, I'm there kind of weeping, and, there's so much time and effort and prayer that's been kind of put into a particular event, and just seeing someone so anointed in God to come and do that is just stunning. So we've got so much to be thankful for, haven't we?
Absolutely. Yeah,
well, definitely. There was one other thing that I particularly wanted to ask you about, and I'm going to try and do this without any political persuasion stuff, because when we have these chats, I almost want to touch base with other leaders to find out how they're coping with seeing some of the things that are going on in the world around them.
Yeah,
and obviously the Dominic Cummings headlines have been all over the place in these last few days, and what's interesting for me is that, and this is without trying to cast judgment on anyone who's said or thought, and the reality is that I don't know whether what he said did happen. I don't know whether there's manipulation of the truth or straight up lying there, and I don't know the scenario. I don't think any of us do. But obviously, in the world of the tabloids, in the world of the press, in the world of social media now, and whether it's any of those channels, what we're seeing is vast amounts of hatred, vast amounts of vitriol, and a huge amount of passion on every side.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, obviously, that's coming from all sorts of different people, and sometimes as Christians, we can get caught up in that. And I guess I just wanted to talk to you for a minute and see whether you've got advice for us about how to live really healthily when it comes to contributing to social media and the like. And it's not an easy one, and I say this is without necessarily even you having to dive into your opinion on that scenario. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I think this is where I'm praying the broadband goes out. But until then, I think with the Dominic Cummings thing, as we're using that as a sort of live example, there's a couple of things with that. I think one is the whole political piece that's going on, and that issue. I think the other is probably linked to it, but is around social responsibility. And I don't want to judge the guy. It's not a story I followed really closely because it didn't really grab me in that sense. And I think if my life came under the kind of scrutiny that I imagine his life has come under, people would find stuff with my life. So, who am I to cast stones? But that having been said, I think that one of the things the whole COVID situation and the lockdown is revealing is that we can't live our lives in isolation of one another and pretend that our actions don't have consequences for other people in perhaps a way that we used to. I think, one of the big lies of this me first kind of way of living, this individualistic approach to life is that it's just not true. No one is truly independent. And whether you're Dominic Cummings or, whoever, or, Steve Wilson, the way you live your life will have consequences for other people, both in your locality, but even nationally and internationally. And I think, we're seeing that with the virus, that each of us has a responsibility, not just towards ourselves, but towards everybody else around us. And so whether that's, making sure that you don't, walk too close to somebody in the supermarket, or, if you've got symptoms,
Now, you've either gone, Paul, or I have gone. So I'm hoping, right, someone's going to have to give me a comment here to tell me whether I'm still live. Someone comment on the Facebook feed for me. Oh, interestingly, Paul has frozen. Helen, we're still here. Justin, we're still live. Oh, see, now I'm going to have to go back to my steak and how to do it. We'll see if Paul joins us in a moment. Listen, I'm going to talk to you as if for a second it's just you and me, because you see, I've been thinking quite a lot about this, and it's ironic that at that moment PJ disappeared, because the truth is that, you know, when it comes to our lives online, when it comes to social media, it is possible that we can say all sorts of things very quickly from our home, and I wonder whether often people think about what they're saying as if that person is with us. Now, when COVID started, when the whole coronavirus kicked in, one of the things that we talked about as a staff team was the recognition of we want our kind of social media profile presence to be connecting with people as far and as wide as we possibly can. And in the midst of that, we've got to work out what we're going to say. Now, even when the coronavirus started, obviously there was this spectrum of people where there were some people who were really throwing their head and giving all their time and attention to reading news articles all over the place. And there were other people who were putting their head in the sand and trying to disconnect from the whole thing. Now, one of the things that we wanted to do was keep a really healthy balance between being aware, but also faith-filled, and to be able to help different people and what they were going through and their circumstances and situations and so on and so forth. At the same time, not be completely oblivious to the fact that this is serious and this is a big deal and this is a real thing. And so one of the things that I put together, I actually found it online. I say put together. One of the things that I shared was this acronym that said THINK. And I guess one of the things that I was hoping to say today to people as they were listening in was to use this when it comes to what they are responding to on social media. And so rather than kind of just throwing mud all over the place, and, you know, kind of in reality, I think all of us, scripture says that, you know, it's easy to point out the speck of sawdust in someone else's eye and ignoring the plank in your own. PJ's texting me. We'll see what he's got to say. And he's going to be joining us in a second. But at the same time, we don't want to be throwing stones at people. We don't want to be the first person to throw a stone. And so this acronym, THINK, I found really helpful. First of all, is it true? That's the T. Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? And is it kind? And I guess I would just encourage us to think about those 5 things. And in the hope that actually for all of us, you know, that's the way that people would treat us as well. And that's not to say that people can't be held to account and so on and so forth. That's not my heart at all. But for us to just think really wisely when we're using social media and the like, I think is just really important for us to do that. I'm going to say hello to a few people. Emma's on the internet again. Yes, KJ, I'm sure. It's like the pastoral team meeting. Tim Brown. This is what happens. PJ suddenly steps out as soon as there's an awkward conversation happening. I get it. Alexandra, great to have you with us. Miss seeing you around. Anu, great to have you. Vanessa says PJ was praying for the internet to go down. Now it is. And he's back, look. Mate, that was outrageous. If that was a moment where...
Yeah. It was well timed, wasn't it? I'm sorry.
Just gonna leave this to Steve. This.
I tell you what it is. I said to my kids, I need to have the broadband between 7:45, I think it was, and 9 o'clock. So what happens at 9 o'clock? They're back on. So that's when it crashed. So I'm now on my phone.
It's totally fine.
I'm so sorry.
How
did you do in my absence?
It was great. I don't know. We'll find out in a moment or two. everyone's abandoned me and be like, what Steve just said. It was horrific.
Yeah. Do you want to land? Should we land there?
Well, I was going to say just a couple of things I was going to sort of land with, if that's all right. So first to say, in the midst of these chats, guys, there's a couple that we've done as pre-records. I did one last week with an amazing lady called Rachel Gardner. I did one today with an evangelist called Andrew Cannon, both of which are just superb. And so they'll be getting released in the kind of coming week or so. So feel free to get hold of them. And the other thing we've just decided to do is on the 19th of June, we're going to be doing a King's Arms, the first time King's Arms quiz night online. And so that's something to get excited about. Those of you who love quizzes as well. So hopefully see a whole bunch of people there. But mate, last thing I want to ask you, and then we'll wrap up if that's all right.
Yeah, sure.
Simply to say, have you got anything you want to share with the church right now? Is there anything you feel like God's speaking to you about, or any kind of final words just now?
Only the final thing, I felt like God speak to me at the start of lockdown when I was, I thought I'd grow some veg and growing some seeds. And when I was planting these seeds, I know nothing about gardening, so I was just doing my best planting them, and I would cover them over with soil as you do. And then as I stepped back, I felt God say to me, Paul, you know that just because you can't see anything doesn't mean to say that nothing's happening. Since then, I would say I've not really heard much from God. It's a bit like I've not, he's been close, but I've not had any particular revelations or anything particularly stand out. But what I've tried to do since then is just do the simple things well.
Yes.
And so I think for many of us, it's like we're in this season trying to figure out what's going on, which way's up, and not sure, can't necessarily hear God's voice very easily. And to you, if there's anybody listening feels that way, I would probably say just because you can't see anything above the surface doesn't mean to say nothing's going on. And of course,
love that.
My plants have sprouted since then. So that was the thing that occurred to me. So yeah, all right.
Mate, I'm
so sorry I lost you part way through.
That's no problem. Mate, we love you.
At the critical moment.
Appreciate you. And I've got no doubt this will help a whole bunch of people. So thanks so much for joining me this evening. So guys, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate you being around to chat and to chip in. God bless. I'm going to end the broadcast now, and we'll hopefully see you very soon.
See you, mate.
Good night, guys. All the best.
See you. Bye.